Hello, folks, and welcome to today's episode, Non-Dual Thinking Through the Parables. Now, we're going to explore non-duality, which really means seeing beyond opposites like right and wrong, or us versus them, the sacred versus the secular, and how it emerges through the gospel teachings in the New Testament parables. These stories offer timeless wisdom, encouraging us to embrace complexity, unity, and compassion. So let's dive into how their lessons can transform how we think and interact with others. Hi, I'm Richard Fontenay, and your host for today's podcast. Now, for the next couple of weeks, we will tackle the concept of spirituality from a more mystical Christian perspective. Now, this is in preparation for our upcoming podcasts, Speaking from the Heart series, which we will begin to air on Mondays in the new year. Now, we'll continue with these Wednesdays podcasts on business, work, and life from a generic and a universal value perspective. But our new series, Speaking from the Heart, will focus on integrating gospel teachings in business, work, and in our everyday lives. So what gives me the moxie, so to speak, to speak on this topic? After all, spirituality is a deeply personal journey. Well, I'm a Christian, like many other people, trying to find his way through the maze of our very troubled world. And just like any other person, no matter what their persuasion may be, I am also trying to work through all of that maze. Now, I'm not given to religiosity or overcomplicated rituals unless they deepen faith, hope, and love, and strengthen the divine within us. I believe in the gospel teachings of love, which really are the foundation for everything that we do or see. Now, I have a background in theology and have had 6 years of very positive seminary life. I was taught by the Benedictines, who introduced me to the wonderful world of meditation and mystical thought. I have also continued my spiritual readings and meditations and evolved my spirituality over these many years through several face-to-face and virtual faith communities, particularly those within the contemplative community. Now, I know that many of my listeners are not Christians. However, I do try to be inclusive of all walks of life. And as I mentioned earlier, my podcasts on Wednesdays will continue to be generic in nature, based on universal values and principles as they relate to business, work, and life. However, speaking from the heart, it will have a distinct Christian flair and based more on feeling than on intellect. And they will be based on the gospel teachings and also will give examples of how those teachings can be incorporated within our business, work, and life. Now let's get started with today's podcast, Non-Dual Thinking Through the Parables. Now, non-dual thinking is about transcending the either-or mindset and seeing the interconnectedness of all things. It's a way of thinking that embraces paradox and mystery, and often associated with spiritual maturity. Non-dual thinking invites us to shift from judgment to acceptance, and from exclusion to inclusion. Now, in the New Testament, Jesus frequently used parables, simple yet profound stories, to disrupt the binary thinking. These parables often ask listeners, and even today's listeners, to reflect deeply and to challenge assumptions and open themselves to new spiritual perspectives. Let's take a look at 3 of these non-dual parables. Many of you will remember them. However, I will go through them again. The first parable relates to the Good Samaritan from Luke chapter 10. Now, this parable challenges dualistic thinking about neighbor and enemy. The Samaritan, a figure culturally ostracized by Jesus' audience, becomes the hero. It reminds us that compassion transcends societal labels and boundaries. So what's the non-dual insight here? Well, true love and mercy are not confined by identity, religion, or status. It invites us to practice compassion in its purest form, without expecting anything in return. The Good Samaritan shows us that we are all connected, and goodness can emerge from unexpected places. The second parable I want to draw upon is the Prodigal Son from Luke chapter 15. The story is of a wayward son's return and his father's unconditional love, and which really upends our notions of merit and punishment. The father's joy contrasts with the brother's resentment, illustrating the tension between grace and justice. So what's the non-dual insight for this parable? Well, the prodigal son is about God's unconditional love, which is always ready to welcome us back, regardless of our mistakes. It also teaches us that God's love is not about earning or deserving. It really simply is. Both sons are loved equally, reminding us to transcend the duality of judgment and embrace the fullness of grace. The third parable is about the workers in the vineyard from Matthew chapter 20. Now, this is a rather stark reminder of how complicated life can get. Here, workers hired at different times receive the same pay, sparking complaints about fairness. This parable was troubling for the field workers of the time, and still misunderstood today. The parable challenges our binary thinking about justice as fair versus unfair. The non-dual insight for this one teaches us that divine generosity operates beyond human standards of fairness. It invites us to rejoice in abundance for all, rather than cling to comparisons. Now, how do the parables teach non-dual thinking? Well, the parables don't provide clear-cut answers. They stir reflection, meditation, and self-examination. They encourage us to see beyond appearances, look for deeper truths beneath the surface conflicts. They encourage us to embrace paradox, understand that two seemingly opposite things can both hold true. And they teach us to let go of judgment, to open our hearts to empathy and unity, especially when faced with differences or disagreement. So how do we, as everyday leaders, apply non-dual thinking in practical terms? Well, in our relationships, we can practice active listening without jumping to conclusions. We can seek to understand rather than to judge, especially in moments of conflict. In our work, we can avoid black and white thinking when solving problems. So instead of that, we can embrace creativity and breakthrough solutions that honor diverse perspectives. In our spiritual growth, we can meditate on parables or sacred stories, asking ourselves, what deeper truth am I invited to see here? So there you have it, folks. Jesus' parables are profound tools for cultivating non-dual thinking. They remind us to see with the eyes of love, hold tensions with grace, and embrace unity in the midst of diversity. Now, as we learn to live non-dually, we become more compassionate, open, and aligned with the spark of the divine within us. Not only that, the parables are a source for anyone who desires to be more humane in a world where the human condition is really under siege these days. Now, thank you for joining this journey into non-dual thinking through the parables. In today's episode, inspired you, please subscribe and share this podcast with others. And this week, take a moment to reflect on one parable and how its lessons can deepen your perspective. Oh, and remember to tune into our Mondays podcasts in the new year, Speaking from the Heart, where we'll focus on more gospel teachings and apply them to business, work, and life. In our next episode, we'll explore centering on spirituality as a way of life. Until then, may you continue to walk in love and in unity. Now, thank you for listening. See you next week. Bye for now.